Hello everyone, my name is Benjamin Yoder with One Controller Port, here today to talk to you about Jumping Flash for the original PlayStation. This is an early 3D platformer for 1995, so pre-Mario 64, pre-Crash Bandicoot. And because of that, it's structurally very different from those games. You have these kind of compact, densely populated environments that are filled with these like floating platforms, and also just kind of strange objects, almost like abstract objects that really have no place being where they're at. And you explore these areas to find these things called jet pods, and once you've collected enough of them, you can basically go to an exit and go to the next level, essentially. But how you explore these environments is really open-ended. It's not like a Mario 64 where you have these set paths that you go up a mountain on. You're inside this bunny mech, and this bunny mech can basically do a double jump, and I believe also up to a triple jump as well. And when you jump, you go ridiculously high. And so what happens is you're launching yourself into the air, and your main focus is really just trying to find that next platform that you can use as the launching point so you can progress further, either to climb up higher, or if you're trying to get over a gap, or maybe just even move across the map, essentially. It's this almost like free-form style of progression because you're not really facing obstacles per se. You're just trying to find that next point you kind of push yourself off of. It almost reminds me of like what a parkour style feeling would be or something. And because of that, though, you can kind of largely jump over everything in this game, which kind of undermines a lot of its level design elements. You'll find like these platforms that kind of move you around in different ways. But in reality, is once you actually like jump off of them, you're kind of in full control of wherever you're going. But that jumping is what makes this game fun, and when the game takes that away from you, that's kind of where it starts to suffer. There's these dungeon crawler elements that you can kind of go into, so you kind of run around these dungeons, and they're very combat focused. So it's you trying to evade enemies who are attacking you, and you're kind of exploring these environments. And it adds variety, I'll give it that. But it does really highlight the rough controls. Being an early 3D game, in an early PlayStation title, it's only using a D-pad, face buttons, and shoulder buttons. It's really slow for you to turn around. It's really hard to aim at enemies and shoot them as well. And when you start constraining the player to like this really tight spot, where you have to, quickly react, it becomes quite challenging. So I appreciate them trying to add variety to the game. I just don't know if they added variety in the right way. I think what the combat trials were, or how I think they better handled the combat trials with the boss fights in the game. Basically, there's I think about 5 or 6 boss fights, and those fights are kind of these arena-based encounters that you fight these large enemies with, but they really do mix both the combat and platforming into one. Not so much platforming between areas, but being able to jump on top of bosses to deal damage to them. Jumping on top also kind of gives you a safe space sometimes, so you can kind of sit on top of a boss while they're doing certain attack patterns. But usually they have some kind of anti-air attack, so you're not just going to sit there and bounce on top of the boss the entire time. You do need to kind of like pull back and just kind of shoot at a boss. So they're a nice bit of variety that I feel like use the complete moveset rather than those dungeons that kind of lock you down into tiny environments in a way that doesn't really work well with the controls. The controls are the same throughout the game, but when you're in the more open-ended environments, they feel a lot more generous, and since you're just jumping, you're mainly just doing fine adjustments with the D-pad. You're not having to spend a lot of time trying to aim at enemies or dodge attacks because you're already just like rocketing through the sky, essentially. But that jumping also is kind of what makes this game feel very samey in a lot of ways, because you're just kind of launching over everything. There's not a lot of interesting challenges. But it's also a short game too. It takes a couple hours to beat at best or at most. So it's by the time you're done with the game, I feel like you've had the chance to kind of experience that fun double jump experience, but you don't really necessarily feel like you need any more than that. The game does ask you to beat the game twice, but honestly, when I played through it the second time, I couldn't really tell much of a difference between those experiences outside of the second time you get the actual ending cutscene. I think technically the jet pods are in different spots and there might be more enemies, but at least personally, I couldn't really notice any real changes that made it a valuable second playthrough. It just feels like it's trying to extend the length of the game. So length of the game. And you know, I don't want to, and hopefully I'm not sounding like I'm too hard on this game, because I think the double jump mechanic's really cool. And if you have an interest in like early 3D games, this is a neat thing to look at, because you know, as far as I'm aware, it's kind of a developmental dead end for the most part. You know, you could kind of look at some of the things that are happening in this game as a first-person game and try to draw some lines like Metroid or something like that. But overall, it's just kind of this interesting early 3D experience of that. It's just kind of this interesting early 3D sandbox experience that doesn't really that I think knows what it's trying to do for fun, but doesn't really necessarily know how to handle, you know, restraining the player in a way that they don't just like completely, you know, bypass the rest of the game because of that jump mechanic. And it's a visually cute game though. Jump mechanic, and you know, this is a game before, you know, Mario 64 and this is a game before, you know, Mario 64 kind of set a standard, so it feels very different from something like that. It's a visually fun game too. It's a visually fun game too. It's cute. It's got this almost like toy box like aesthetic in some levels like that. And it's a visually fun game too. You know, it's cute. It has almost this toy box style aesthetic. It can run a little inconsistently frame rate wise, but the frame rate's actually fairly high for the time. So it's very playable. And even I'm playing this on the PlayStation Classic release here, which is probably well known, not the greatest way to play this game. It plays, you know, perfectly well as far as I can tell here. So, anyways, that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. Anyways, that's all I got to say about Jumping Flash. Thanks for coming. If you're interested in some more PlayStation titles, I have 2 reviews I'll kind of point you to. One is for Tiny Bullets, a PlayStation title I imported a while ago that's kind of like a 3D platformer Zelda-style game that's very fun. I think it's pretty accessible for Westerners. If you're looking for something you can import, I think it's a great choice. And then I'll also like my Mega Man Legends review. It's kind of an older review, and I don't know how positive I am about Mega Man Legends, but if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on PlayStation titles, there's one for you too. So that's it for this week. 2. OneControllerPort.com is the website. OneControllerPort.com is the website. If you have any interest in some games that have a different take on a franchise, if you have any interest in games that have a different take on a franchise or genre, I highly recommend you check it out. If you have any interest in games that have a different take on a franchise or genre, and you're interested in like, articles, videos, podcasts, things like that, I definitely recommend checking it out. That's it. Thank you so much for your time. And feel free to like and subscribe if you like this video. Thanks for your time and have a great week.